Masechet Shekalim, Daf 14. We're continuing our analysis of all the various functionaries in the Bet HaMikdash that had different important jobs. We'll give some descriptions of each one. So the next one is Nechunya Chofer Shichin. Nechunya, he was the well digger. He would go make sure to find wells and caves that were sources of water. He was an expert in it. שהיה חופר שיחין ומערות, והווה ידע, היי דן כיף מקורר מיה, והי דן כיף יתבה שרבובה. So he knew different rocks, which ones contain water, which ones contain fissures, ועד היכן שרבותה מתיה, and how deep the fissures are, and how much will you have to dig into that rock in order to find water. Others interpret this mikored as you know where the cool water is and where the warm water was. So he was a real expert in that. However, there is a tragic story about him. His son died of thirst, which is kind of ironic because he was an expert in finding water, yet his son died of thirst. This same person, Nechunya, a story is told about him in the Talmud Bavli in Bava Kama, which is about his daughter who fell into a pit and was stuck there for several hours, but was saved with the help of the prayer of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. So this is interesting. Did he have both a son and a daughter who were endangered, and his son died and his daughter survived? It is possible. Maybe he brought his kids to work and this was a dangerous situation. I think it's probably more likely that there's actually just one story about him, and this one about the son perhaps is the historical one. The story about the daughter, I think, is a combination of the story here and another one that we're about to see. Okay, so I'll keep that in mind. Amar Rabbi Chanina Amanda Amar Chamana Vatran Yivateran Bene Me'oi. Someone, if anyone says that God overlooks punishment, that he's easygoing and doesn't care, then that person's intestines will be overlooked. In other words, there's actually the Nasiv explains this in a more naturalistic way. If you go to a doctor and say, well, I didn't take my medication and it hurts, can you forgive me? Right, doctor can't forgive you. This is just a consequence. And so therefore, one should not expect that God will do a miracle and undo any consequences of a person's actions. But rather, if you see someone who sins and goes unpunished, you should assume that God is patient with him, but will eventually collect his due when appropriate. Going back to this righteous Nechunya, who was served in the Bet HaMikdash and always found water for the pilgrims that were coming. If he was such a great person and did such a great service for the community, why did he suffer such a terrible thing to lose a son? Well, the pasuk says in Tehillim that God's surroundings storm mightily. The word nisa'ara is also like sa'ara, like a hair's breadth. For those who are on a high level, judges them, and even as a hair's breadth, even small deviation can cause great consequence. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yosef, lo mitam hazeh, ela min ma dichtiv, v'nurahu al kol sebivav. Rabbi Yosef, we can learn the same thing, not from that pasuk, but from another pasuk from Tehillim. It says God's awesomeness or dreadfulness is upon all of his surroundings. So whoever is near him, so his fear, his dread is on those who are close to him more than those who are far away from him. Someone who has a very high level position is extremely responsible. Even a small mistake can have a large consequence. But Rabbi Chagai b'shem Rabbi Shemuel bar Nachman, Maaseh b'chasid echad shaya chofer borot shichin umarot lobrim b'shavim. So then we have another person that had a similar job, and he was pious. He would dig pits, wells, and caves on the road for people that would pass by, so they would have water. One time, his daughter was passing over. She was going to a wedding, maybe her own. And she was washed away by the river, and everyone came to console him, but he refused to accept the condolences. So again, another kind of ironic story where he's involved in providing water for people, and now his daughter gets washed away with water. So he would not be consoled, perhaps because of this great irony. He was helping people with this all the time. Now, sure enough, she's gonna be saved. So here's what happens. Pinchas came to visit to console him. This is the same sage we learned about his pious donkey yesterday. He tried to console him, but so this pious person would not be consoled. So he told the people in the community, "This is your chassid. He's so pious. If he's so pious, he should accept the condolences. I mean, when a person is sick, we pray, we do everything we can, but once a person passes, so then it's proper to accept God's judgment. And this person, why isn't he accepting these condolences? And that's the way it is. So they told him the whole story, how he supplies water for everything, and then now his daughter should drown. He didn't know the whole background of the story. Can it be that he honors God so much by helping God's creations and giving them water, and now he should be punished by water? Rabbi Pinchas said, "Yeah, you're right. This is not right." Just as he said that, there was a rumor, a report spread throughout the city. The daughter was found. She just returned. How was she saved? Some say she grasped onto a branch and was able to pull herself out of the river. And others say it was an angel in the form of this sage who came to visit Pinchas ben Yair and rescued her. Okay, so this is a very similar story about someone also found water, and he had a daughter, and the daughter everybody thought was dead, but sure enough she was alive through the intervention of a sage. So I think what happened in the Talmud Bavli is the story about Nechunya and the story about this chassid combined into one. And so that's why the story was told about Nechunya's daughter and the sage that helped him out. In fact, probably more historically, it was his son that was the victim, and in that version of the story, he did not make it. Okay, Givini Karoz. So another one of the temple officiants, so his name was Givini, and he was the temple crier. He was the announcer. He wants all the Kohanim should get ready and go and do the service. Levim should go on the platform where they would sing, and Israel would go to their watches. All of Israel had time slots when there were days when they would be in charge to be the participants, and they would during the Bet HaMikdash service and watch it. So everybody get to their places. This particular person, Givini, had such a loud voice. At one time, King Agrippa heard his voice from 8 parsangs away, something like 16 miles. King Agrippa was was from the family of Herod and Mariamne, one of the last Hasmonean rulers. And so he was a patron of the sages, and he gave many gifts to this announcer because he was so impressed with his job. And that would have been around 44 CE when the Bet HaMikdash was up. Okay, the next person is Ben Gever al Ne'ilat She'arim. There's another person named Ben Gever. And this Ben Gever was in charge of locking the gates at night and opening them in the morning. So his name literally means Ben Gever, the son of a man. So we're analyzing his name. Tirgem Rav Komed Bet Rabbi Shela. One time, Rav was the interpreter for Rabbi Shela. The way that when someone gave a public lecture, an official public lecture, in this case, Rabbi Shela was the sage. So it wasn't considered respectful for the rabbi to have to scream loud to a big group that was gathering there, but the rabbi would sit and explain it softly to someone next to him, and that student next to him would then stand up and explain. Not he wouldn't really translate. They're speaking the same language. He would just say it in a loud voice, and he would add explanations sometimes to clarify for the people. So he was a helper. So one time Rav, we know him as the great Amora Rav, but in this case he was the student who was announcing for Rav Shela. So now when Rav Shela, when he got to this word, there's a Mishnah in Yoma. It says every day a Geved would when the Geved would call, then they would begin the Bet Hamikdash services. So he explained it as talking about a rooster. When the rooster called, then that's early morning, right? And now you can start cleaning off the mizbech and so on. However, even though the Bishela, the teacher said it's a rooster, when Rav translated it, he explained it as a person named meaning a person cried out, Geved, as his name, like our Mishnah. And so Amar Le Emor Kera Tarne Gola. So Rav Shela said, no, don't say that. It's supposed to be a rooster, right? That's what I said. Now you're misunderstanding or mistranslating what I said. Amar Le Ad Tanenan Ben Geved Itlach Lememar Bar Tarne Gola. So he says, look in our Mishnah here, where the person is called Ben Geved. So what are you going to say? He's the son of a rooster? That doesn't make sense to call it rooster here. It means that's his name, right? Ben Geved. So that's why Rav says, I corrected you while I was explaining what you said, not a rooster, but that's simply his name. What was the Rav Shela thinking? Well, truth is, in the Mishnah, in Yoma, it says, Ha Geved with Ha Yediyah. You never put a Ha Yediyah on a name, right? You don't say Ha Ahuva. Doesn't make sense. Ha Yaakov, right? So it could be that in the Mishnah there, it actually does mean a rooster, and here it does sound like it's actually the guy's name. Okay. Anyway, this is only one time period, and so maybe at different time periods they had different systems. All right, Ben. Next section. Ben Bevai al Hapakia. Ben Bevai, he was in charge of the shredding the garments, the clothing of the Kohanim. Once they got worn out, he would shred them and make wicks out of them and use the wicks for the menorah. And he was an expert in doing this. Shaya mizayeg petilot. I mean, what's the big deal? These wicks had to last the whole night, right, to be lit. So, summer nights are longer, winter nights are shorter. So he knew exactly how to do this. Okay, so you might think that making wicks is not such a big deal. It seems like a low-level job that he should be counted among the 15 functionaries of the Bet HaMikdash. But we learn an important lesson from here, which is a story. One time, Rabbi Yosef went to a place called Kufra, and he wanted to appoint people to be in charge of the community. He says, you be the president, you be the treasurer, right? So that people, so they'll be organized. But the people did not want to accept the appointments. Like, oh, we don't want to, it's beneath us to have to go and bother with this community service, and they didn't want to do it. So Rabbi Yosef came and said, Ben Bevai alapakia, listen, look at the Mishnah that we just read. Ben Bevai, he was in charge of making the wicks. Look, if he who was in charge of this lowly job of being in charge of the wicks, and he's listed among the great of the generation who helped everybody out, if you take this job, you're going to be responsible for life and death. You're going to be giving out money for poor people and food, and so all the more so you will be counted and considered the greatest of the generation. So don't think that working for public service is beneath you. This is the greatest job, and we can learn that from Ben Bevai. Okay, next job is Ben Arzal Hasilsal. Ben Arzal was in charge of the cymbal. We have a picture here of an ancient Egyptian instrument, and maybe something like that, or it could have been like cymbals like we know. And he would bang the cymbals together when it was time for the Levim to start singing and playing instruments. So that was an important job. Yaditen Taman Hanif Hasegan Basudarin Vikish Ben Arza al Hasilsal. The Segan, meaning the deputy Kohen Gadol, when he would wave a flag indicating, okay, you could start, and Ben Arza would bang the cymbals, and then they knew it was time to begin. Okay, the next functionary, Hugras ben Levi al-Ashir. He was the conductor of the Leviim, one of the singers. He knew how to sing in an extraordinary way, where no one else could do what he did. That he would make his voice very pleasant while he was singing. And he would put his thumb in his mouth and he could make all different kinds of sounds of music. Sounds like he was a beatboxer or something like that, right? He had this special technique. And all the other Kohanim would just like lift their head up and like in astonishment and amazement, or maybe to try to sing along with them. So that's how impressive he was at his job. Okay, there was not just one person here, but an entire family, probably a multi-generational family, and they knew how to make lechem apanim, the showbread. That's 12 loaves that they switched out every Shabbat. They knew a secret of how to make the lechem apanim. The showbread was a special shape. It was kind of like a U shape. So you have to make bread in that special shape, and it has to last the whole week, right? And not spoil and have preservatives or anything. So they knew how to bake it and also how to remove it from the oven. Usually they would bake by taking dough and sticking it onto the side of the oven. And then they would have to peel it off, but they knew how to do that without ruining it. But they didn't want to teach anybody else. They had a monopoly on this, so they could, charge the Beit HaMikdash whatever they wanted, and they didn't want anybody to share. Okay, Alexandria. So now the sages, they didn't want this family to have a monopoly on it. Maybe they're charging them too much. They need someone else to know how to do it. So they brought the greatest experts from Alexandria. Alexandria was known to be a place of great knowledge. But turns out, yes, they were able to make the lechem apanim in a mold, but they didn't know how to remove it from the oven, because then when they would remove it from the mold, it would ruin. So these experts from Alexandria could not do it. Now the problem is they already fired Bet Gadamu and hired these other people from Alexandria. So now they had no one to make them. So Bet Gadamu masikin b'bifnin v'rodvim b'chutz v'lo hayta mitpeshet. So now we're going to explain how they did it. It turns out the Gemara seems to actually know some of the secret. So Bet Gadamu, what they would do is they would bake it while it was inside the oven, and then they would remove the mold and take it out of the mold while it was outside the oven, and they knew how to do it without spoiling. However, the people from Alexandria, they would put the mold in and try to take it out of the mold while it was still in the oven, I guess before it was fully baked. And it would spoil. So you see that they were not able to do the same job. כיוון שידעו חכמים בדבר הזה, אמרו כל מה שברא הקדוש ברוך הוא לכבודו ברא, שנאמר, כל פעל אדוני למענהו. So now the sages realized that they need Bet Gadamu. They can't do without them. So they quoted the pasuk from Mishleh, that God made everything for his own purpose, right? Everything is for God's honor. So they had to demean themselves and forgo their own honor and go back to Bet Gadamu and ask them, hey, we actually need your help back. And it's more important that we have God's honor in mind, meaning have the lechem apanim in the right way for the Beit HaMikdash that will serve God's honor. So now they got to go hire them back. So they went back to Bet Gadamu. Please, we need you to continue making the bread. And they said, no, we're not coming. And the sages had to double their compensation for them to come back. They used to make 12 maneh, and now they got paid 24. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yehuda says, no, they used to get paid 24, and now they're getting 48. Ask them, how come you're not teaching anybody your secret formula? Why don't you share your formula? avodah zarah shelahen. We have a tradition that the Bet HaMikdash eventually soon will become destroyed. And we do not want to teach it to anybody else because they'll know the secret formula, but they're going to use it for idolatry. And so therefore, better that nobody know it. We have to keep it a secret so that it will not fall into the wrong hands. So in other words, they were saying we're not keeping it for selfish reasons to have a monopoly. We need to control it so that it won't be used for idolatry. So that was their claim. Seems the sages were suspicious of that. והדברים הללו מזכירן אותן לשבח, שלא יעשה ביד ביניהם פת נקייה מעולם, שלא יהיו אומרים ממעשה לחם הפנים, הם אוכלים. However, the sages did still remember them for something good, for praise, that they never produced for their own house fine bread, so that no one would ever suspect them and say, oh, you know what, they're using they're using the showbread, they're eating it themselves. They're taking the ingredients provided from the supposed to be for the Bet HaMikdash to make this refined bread, and they're eating it themselves. They're getting personal benefit from it. So in order, certainly they wouldn't do that, but even to be beyond suspicion, they would never have refined bread in their home at all for their own uses, to be above reproach. Okay, the next group of people, Bet Avtinas Amasa Ketoret, they were experts in how to make the incense, right? They knew all the ingredients and how much of each ingredient and exactly how to make it. They also wouldn't share their secret recipe, we'll see. Shabet Avtinas Yubikin Bamaase Pituma Ketoret Bamaale Ashan Velod Asu Lelamed. They knew not only how to prepare the ketoret, but also there was another special ingredient called Maale Ashan, smoke razor. They wanted to have the special effect that when they burnt it, it would make a pillar of smoke that went all the way up and only then would spread out. And that would show the connection between earth and heaven. So that was a special secret, and they would not share it with anyone. So they went. Now the sages wanted to try to break the monopoly and try to find other people that could make the ketoret. So they went to the best experts in Alexandria, and sure enough, they could make the ketoret, but they did not know how to get the smoke razor to make that special effect. שבית אבטינס הייתה מתמרת ועולה כמקל ופרוסה ויורדת, ושללו הייתה פרוסה מיד. When Bet Avtinas did it, that would make a staff all the way up to the ceiling and only then spread out and come down, maybe like a mushroom cloud. And however, when the Egyptians did it, they burned it, just everything spread out immediately, so it did not work. Okay, modern times people have been searching for this, continue to search for this Maleh Ashan, and some people think it's this tree, which is very flammable, and you can just take a branch of it, so it makes immediately, and perhaps this is what they used to make the smoke rise, use as smoke riser. Okay, so now they tried to get these Alexandrians to break the monopoly, but didn't work. So they said, you know what? Everything is here for God's honor. Everything that I created is for my glory. So therefore, in other words, God's glory is more important. So we got to go and forego our own honor and go and ask the family to come again. To come again, and so that way that God's glory, the glory of Bet HaMikdash, will be restored. So I said, please, can you come back? And they said, no, now you fired us, tried to get someone else, we're not coming back, until their salary was doubled. How much? Same amounts. One first opinion says they were making 12 money, and now they made 24. No, they were already making 24, and now they made 48. So the sages asked them, how come you don't want to teach anybody else the secret formula? So the same answer as the bakers, says because we have a tradition that this house, the Bet HaMikdash, will be destroyed, and we don't want to teach anybody else because they're going to use it for idolatry. I mean, it's true from the time of Yirmiyah, people were doing ketoret everywhere to all the idolaters. So ketoret was definitely something that was used for idolatry, and they said we don't want to have our secret formula to get into the wrong hands. So that's why we're not doing it for selfish reasons. we're doing it l'shem shamayim. So even though the sages might have been suspicious of their motivation, nevertheless, they did mention them with praise because of the following. Nobody from the family from this family would ever, the woman would never go out with perfume. So that no one should ever suspect that they're taking some of the ketoret for themselves, and that's why they smell so nice. So they would not wear perfume at all to be above reproach. Not only that, even the boys and the men in the family, when they married someone from a different family, would say, listen, we'll only marry you on condition that you never wear perfume again, so that no one should suspect us. In that way they can fulfill the pasuk that Moshe said to the two tribes that stayed on the eastern bank of the Jordan, you have to come in and fight with us, and then you'll fulfill your promise, and you'll be clear of your promise, both before God and Israel. We saw this pasuk before. And so that way, not only will they know that, well, God will know that they never stole, but they should be beyond any suspicion, even from their fellow man as well. Okay, so they remembered well for that, even though they wouldn't share the formula. But more about the secret formula. Amar bi Yosef, Pa'am achat hayiti omed b'Yerushalayim, umasati tinok echad mishel bet avtinas. Amarti lo beni me'ezo mishpacha at. So Rabbi Yosef says, one time I was in Jerusalem, I saw a child, and he was from the house of Avtinos. So I asked him, from what family are you? And he said, from that family, from the house of Avtinos, the ones who made the ketoret. This is now after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, way after. Amarti lo beni avotecha lefi shenitkavenu rabot kibodam et kibod shamayim lefichach kibodam nitma'et uchvot shamayim nitraba. So he said, he saw that this kid was just poor. He had nothing with him. And so he said, your forefathers, because they wanted to increase their own honor by keeping the secret formula for themselves, and they reduced the honor of Shamayim. They didn't want anybody else to know about it, and could have been lost. Therefore, in consequence, their honor, the honor of that family was reduced, and Kavod Shamayim is not hurt. Right? Kavod Shamayim continues just fine. So he really gave it to this kid. That his forefathers were not right for keeping the formula for themselves. Amar Rabbi Akiba, Sachli Shimon ben Loga, Melaket Haiti Asabim, Ani v'tinok echad mishel bet abtinas, v'yito oto shebacha, v'yito oto shesachak. Rabbi Akiba, it's interesting, because Rabbi Akiba, we have this famous story when he cried and laughed when he saw the Bet HaMikdash destroyed and people misusing it. Anyway, he has a story about this Shimon ben Loga, who was gathering some different herbs together. The Shimon ben Loga, and a certain child. That child was a descendant of the house of Tinas. And I saw the child was crying, and then he laughed or smiled. So he says, first of all, why did you cry? Because of the glory of my family. We used to be great aristocrats. Everybody respected us because we had the special job, and now we are down and out. So why did you laugh? Because of the great, because of the honor that will be for the righteous in the future. In other words, hopefully one day when the Bet HaMikdash is restored, we will be able to continue our job and be restored to our glory. So now to be the Shimon ben Loga asked him, so what prompted you all of a sudden to think about your past, to think about your family's future? He said, I saw some of this smoke riser herb in front of me. It's right here, right in the field. So then, right, Shimon says, please show it to me. I want to see the secret. No, I have a tradition from my forefathers not to show it to anyone. So this is fascinating. Even after the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, this family still continued to transmit a secret recipe to their children in the hopes that one day they will use it again. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Paga bi zaken echad mishel bet avtinas umegilat samanim beyado. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri reports that one time an elder that was from the house of Avtinas, he met him, and he had a recipe book, a scroll with all the list of all the herbs in his hand. Marli Rabbi l'shavar hayu bet Abbas Sinoin ve'hayu mosrin el et Megillah zo elu le'elu v'achshav she'enan bet Abba nemanim helech et Megillah v'yizaher ba. He says, listen, it used to be for many generations that our family were very discreet, were careful, and so they would keep it a secret. But now the family is not discreet anymore. They're not being careful with it. It's already many generations. And it's already after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed. So he gave it to the sage and says, listen, you take it and you be careful with it so that no one should misuse this information and use it for idolatry. So he came and he told the story to the Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva started crying and he said, from now on, we should not mention the house of Avtinas for denigration, that they're hiding it. We see that, all along, they were sincere. They really wanted to protect it, so it wouldn't go into hands of idolatry. And you see right here, the second that there was a fear that they themselves will not be careful with it, they did share the secret recipe with someone who would be more careful with it. Okay, fantastic story. And now, next person, Elazar al-Parochet. Elazar was in charge of the curtains in the Bet HaMikdash to weave them. Shayam emunah l'orgeh Parochet, he was in charge of the curtain weavers. Pinchas HaMalbish. Pinchas was in charge of the wardrobe of the Kohanim. Shemabish bigdei kiuna gedolah. He would dress the Kohen Gadol. Right, every Kohen Gadol that came, they would need to be sized and have everything just right, perfect for him and ready to go. So this person who was in charge, he was such an expert in clothing and wardrobe that one time he met a Roman. So there was this Roman official, and he wanted to have something special clothing, maybe a military uniform made for him. So he went to this Pinchas, Pinchas was such an expert in fashion and had to make clothing just fit just right. So he made a uniform for this Roman official. And the Roman official was so happy with what job he did. He paid him with 8 gold coins, and some say 12 golden coins. Okay, so that just shows that he was, an expert in all ways. But one should not think that he was giving the Roman official the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. That would not be appropriate, and they wouldn't remember him for well. The point is that he was just so good at his job that he could have gotten a job anywhere in the empire. But yet he applied his talents to the Bet HaMikdash. Okay, and now we get to the next Mishnah. And pochatin mishiba amar kolin ushlosha gizbarin. Now, regarding the monies, we want to make sure that it shouldn't be just one person in charge of all the money. You need 7 trustees and 3 treasurers in charge. Amar kolin could also be accountants, but it looks like some kind of a trustee. Also, you should not make an authority over the public if it's less than 2 people. 2 people, they can have checks and balances and check each other, not just one person. Except there was these people, Achia, he was the Bet HaMikdash doctor, and when the people, because they had so much meat and water without wine, so they got sick, but still he knew how to solve those problems, so he could do that by himself, and everybody trusted him. And also Elazar, who was in charge of the curtains, he was so well trusted that he could do it by himself, and the community accepted them even though they were single people. Okay, and pochatin meshelosha gizbarin meshiba amar kolin. So now the Gemara is quoting that you need 3 treasurers and 7 trustees. So it mentions Taneh Misheneh talikin. And besides that, you also need 2 executive supervisors. They would be on top even of them, of those people. Okay, interesting Greek word, katholikos, meaning a supervisor, someone in charge, high up. Okay, now where do we learn all these numbers? We're actually learning from Tanakh and Divrei Yamim. Was talking about Chizkiah, the king, when he set up all the officiants for the Beit HaMikdash. So he had these 3 people, and he said that they would be the treasurers. And so now these 7 people, these were trustees. So there you go, you need 7. Miyad Kanan Yahu Shimei Achiv Hatilikin. And these 2 people, they were the Catholicos, so you need 2 of those. And all those were supervised by Chizkiah, he was the king, and Nazariah, who was the Kohen Gadol, right? It's called the Negid, but that's the Kohen Gadol. So above them, you have all those levels. Good. Now we could see how each one answers to each other. Keshehu chotem, when someone that came and made a deposit, and they were going to put it in some kind of lock, the deposit of the treasury of the Beit HaMikdash. So you had to have multiple levels of lock, so no one could access it without the levels above and below. So first you have the gizbar, so the treasurer would put his seal on it. And he would transfer it over to the trustee. And so the trustee would stamp it and send it to the executive supervisor. He would stamp it and then pass it over to the Kohen Gadol. And the Kohen Gadol would stamp it and give it to the king, who would give the final seal. And so that's it. Now it would be safe. We know no one would access it unauthorized. Now when they had to open it up again, Kohen Gadol and so do all the other way around. First the king would come and he would undo his he would examine, yes, that's my seal, and allow them to open that, and Kohen Gadol, and then the executive supervisor and trustee, and then the treasurer, and then they could access those funds. And now regarding this rule that you shouldn't have no one should be in an authority position without having 2 people there that could check each other. We can learn this from Shemot itself. When they're building the Mishkan, it says they would take the gold and the blue and the saw and the blue and the dyes. So it says they in plural, so it should always be at least 2 people that are doing it. And the Mishnah that we saw, it mentioned for most of them, except for the houses of families, it mentioned only 1 person that was in charge of each item. But that means the main person in charge, but that this would assume that each of those people had someone else who also was alongside them and helping out. Chanina. And now the question is, how did Moshe get rich? It's important. They're assuming that he was rich. There is another Gemara that talks about a Navi. A Navi should be wealthy, so that he should no one should be able to. Also, a judge, no one should be able to bribe them. They should be, stand above and therefore be beyond bribery or anything like that. And also people gain people's respect that way. Anyway, how did Moshe make his money? So he got it from the shavings that broke off during chiseling of the second tablets. For the second tablets, Hashem says, you go chisel them yourself. So they were made out of something that was very precious, and from the extra chiseling, he was able to become wealthy. Pesol means whatever comes off that's extra is yours and you can have it. So Moshe did not make money from anyone else from the community. Another opinion is that God made a quarry of precious stones and pearls in Moshe's tent, and so he could go anytime there and quarry some precious from some jewels. So he was not therefore dependent on others. Okay, in end of in Shemot, as after Chet Egel, it says everyone would look at Moshe and until he went to the hand. What do you mean they were looking? They were gazing at him. So there's two opinions. Some say they would gaze at him in an unfavorable way. Oh, look at Moshe, how did he make his money? Where was he taking it from? They would look at him suspiciously. Others said, no, favorably. They would look upon him for his greatness, for his holiness, and be inspired by him. So we can explain these two opinions. Shakin, Hamun Keda'in, Hamun Kupad, Achel Min Di Hoda'eh, Veshate Min Hoda'eh. The ones that look badly upon Moshe, they said, look at his legs and his feet and his flesh, look how fat he is and how well fed he is. You know why? Because he's taking his drink from the Jews and taking his food from the Jews, right? And everything he takes from us. But those who say, for good, those who said for good, they said we look at his righteousness, his merits, and hopefully we can be inspired and also earn merit by following in his ways. Okay, very interesting. And now we get to the last Mishnah for the staff. Arba'ah chotamot hayu b'mikdash v'chatu b'lehen eigel zachar gedi v'choter. Right, one of the first officiant we said before was Yochanan ben Pinchas and Achia. So they were in charge of the seals and of the wine libation. So here's how it worked. People would come in and they would come with payment, and they need some wine for wine libation. They want to buy it from the Bet HaMikdash. So they would pay the cashier. The cashier would give them a seal and a receipt, and they would take that receipt, and then they can go to the station where they had the wine libation and receive the appropriate amount there. Okay, that's how it worked. However, depending on the korban, there were different amounts of wine libations that you would bring. So therefore, the receipts, there were 4 different types of receipts. So one would be for a calf, meaning for a large animal, a cow. Zachar, that would be for a ram, a small animal. Gedi was for a goat. Chote is for a leper. It's called chote because leprosy or whatever sadat is associated with various 7 different sins. Okay, Ben Azai Omer Chamishayu. No, Ben Azai says there were 5 different types of receipts. And actually they were not written in Hebrew, but rather in Aramaic, because people know Aramaic better. Egel, that's the same as Egel. Dechad is the same as Achai, would be a ram. Gedi would be the goat, young goat, 1-year-old. Chote dal, chote ashir. And for the sinner or the leper, someone who's poor and someone who's rich, they gave different amounts. And so they actually had to have different receipts for each of them. Okay, so just regarding the amounts here, right? Each of them needs a different amount. If someone brings a calf, then they have to have 3 isaron of flour and a half hin of wine and oil. So it's a big animal. It requires more materials to go with it. A male, meaning a ram, then you get 2 isaron only, and a 1/3 hin of wine and oil. And for a goat, that would be even less. Then that person needs only 1 isaron of flour and a 1/4 of a hin of wine and oil. So you see, each of the receipts just having that word on it, and when they went to pick up the wine, they would know exactly how much the person needs. Egel meshamesh im niskeh bakar gedolim uktanim zacharim unkevot. So even though the sign said calf, but that seal would be the same amount and could be used whether it's a big, large or small animal, or male or female, all kinds of cattle. That would be fine. They use that. Gedi meshamesh im niskeh ason gedolim uktanim zacharim unkevot. Elim. The one that said Gedi, in other words, the 3rd item on the list, that would be for all kinds of sheep, whether it was big or small, male or female, except for Elim. So Elim was its own category. And Ayil, Meshamesh Miskeh Elim Bilbad. So Ayil, meaning ram, that's the 2nd item on the list. That would be only for its libations, because that was a different amount. And the one that said chote, that would be all the libations that a mesorah needs, the 3 different animals that he's required to bring with all their libations. Okay. So if someone needs some wine for Nesachim, first he goes to Yochanan. He's the cashier, and so he pays him. He's in charge of the seals. He gives the money and he gets a seal. Then he comes to Achia, who's in charge of the libations. He gives him the seal and he gets the actual wine. At the end of each day, they would have to balance the books. And so Achia, who was in charge of who had all the seals now, he would bring all the seals and give them to Yochanan, and they would make sure that there was the same amount of seals as money. And so he would transfer over the money so that then they could, use that money for what they needed it for. If there was some money missing, then Yochanan, who was the cashier, he has to pay out of his own pocket, right? Like the cashier or someone who works in the bank, and there's not enough money in the register, and they got to pay out of their own salary. So he should have been more careful. Maybe he gave people too much change, or he didn't count correctly. But if there's more in the cashier, in the register, than the number of seals of receipts, then the extra goes to the Bet HaMikdash. He can't take it home with him. So the Bet HaMikdash always gets the upper hand. Someone loses their receipt. They paid, and now they lost the receipt. They come say, I can't find my receipt. What should I do? So we tell them to wait until the nighttime. If they find that there is, in fact, extra money and one less seal, that means, you must have actually lost it. And then they would give him the wine because they can now believe that he lost it. But if not, if the books were balanced, then we can't believe them that he lost it. No, maybe he's lying. So he would have to buy it again. On these seals, they wouldn't use the same receipts every day, but it was written on the seal the day and the day of the week. The name of the day of the week was written on the seal, so that they wouldn't be able to use it from one day to the next. This is like the train tickets on Amtrak. There's different colors for each day, so that you can't go and find some that they used yesterday and throughout, and then go and think that you're going to use it again. Okay, that is the Mishnah. Now, regarding Ben Azai, Chote Dal Lama, Ben Azai is one that says we need 5 different types of receipts. Why? Why do you need to separate between a Mesorah who's rich and a Mesorah who's poor? The reason is because according to, he says that, according to Ben Azai, that the poor person brings a log of oil with him. And so therefore, since we assume he's bringing it with him, the Bet HaMikdash does not have to provide him with that log of oil. So that's why it's a different amount. However, according to the rabbis, it says no, the Bet HaMikdash provides that also. And so therefore the poor and the rich Mesorah have to actually be given the same amount. And therefore the rabbis require only 4 different types of seals, and Ben Azai requires 5. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen, amen.